The USS Charlotte moved slowly through the dark water south of Sri Lanka, its hull sliding through the Indian Ocean with the quiet confidence of a submarine that had spent months at sea. She had left Pearl Harbor early in the year as part of a Pacific deployment supporting U.S. naval operations across the Indo-Pacific. The patrol had carried her thousands of miles across open ocean, through familiar waters near Guam, past Singapore, and briefly alongside the bright skyline of Perth before the submarine disappeared again into the deeper patrol lanes of the region. Liberty ports felt distant now. Inside the control room, red lighting washed across steel bulkheads and quiet faces. The air smelled faintly of machinery and electronics. Sailors spoke softly, the way submariners always did when surrounded by delicate instruments listening to the sea. The sonar display glowed. "Contact steady," the operator said. The acoustic pattern on the screen had been tracked for hours. Propeller beats, mechanical vibrations, the unmistakable rhythm of a warship moving at moderate speed. Above them, somewhere in the dark water, the Iranian frigate continued its slow course across the Indian Ocean. At the fire control station, technicians worked carefully as the firing solution tightened. The captain stood beside the console, watching the numbers update. Submarine officers spent years studying this moment, not because it happened often, because it almost never did. In classrooms at Groton and in the quiet lecture halls of the fleet, instructors talked about the old patrols, boats in the Pacific during the 1940s, torpedoes sliding from tubes towards silhouettes seen through narrow periscopes, grainy black and white photographs, combat patrol reports, the kind of material young officers studied with curiosity but rarely expected to experience. Tonight, the control room felt very similar to the descriptions in those reports. Quiet, deliberate, professional. Encounters between the United States Navy and Iran at sea were rare, but not unheard of. In 1988, the frigate USS Samuel B. Roberts nearly sank after striking an Iranian mine in the Persian Gulf, triggering the largest U.S. naval battle since World War II during Operation Praying Mantis. Years later, the destroyer USS Cole would be torn open by a suicide attack in Yemen, killing 17 American sailors. The ocean had long memories. Ships changed, crews changed, but the risks of war at sea remained the same. The weapons officer glanced up from the console. "Solution holding." The captain nodded. No one rushed. Submarine crews learned patience early in their careers. The ocean rewarded it. For a moment, the captain rested a hand on the edge of the console and watched the fire control data scroll across the screen. The target's speed remained low. The Iranian frigate was moving cautiously through the Bay of Bengal, running on a single engine as she made the long return voyage toward the Persian Gulf after the multinational naval exercise at Visakhapatnam. "Slow ship," the captain said quietly. The navigator glanced at the display. 6 knots. The captain allowed himself a thin smile. Slow ships were easier to kill. High-speed maneuvering forced a torpedo solution to constantly adjust for changing bearings and speed, but a ship creeping across the sea in a steady line gave the fire control computers exactly what they wanted: predictability. "Helps the wire," the weapons officer added softly. The captain nodded again. Through the tracking data, they already knew what they were following: a Mooj-class Iranian frigate, Iris Dina. The intelligence briefings before deployment had covered her in detail: indigenous radar systems, anti-ship missiles, and Tehran's effort to project naval power beyond the Persian Gulf. Satellite reports had confirmed the ship's recent presence at the Milan naval exercise in India, where dozens of navies had gathered in a rare display of maritime cooperation. Now the frigate was alone, returning west. The captain watched the numbers update slowly on the screen. Far above them, the war had already spread across the Middle East. Iranian missiles and drones were striking targets across the Gulf: Dubai, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and American bases in Kuwait. U.S. soldiers had already been killed. Governments blamed each other on television, while the conflict widened by the hour. Down here, none of that mattered. There was only a contact on the screen. "Tube 1 ready," the weapons officer said quietly. Inside the forward torpedo tube sat a wire-guided Mark 48, connected to the submarine by a thin control wire that would allow the crew to steer the weapon during its run. "Outer door open." Green indicators appeared. The captain stepped toward the periscope. "Bring her up." The submarine rose slowly. Water streamed down the periscope lens as it broke the surface. The captain rotated the handles. The ship appeared immediately, a dark shape on the horizon. Navigation lights glimmered faintly as the frigate cut through calm water. For a moment, he simply observed. In training films, the sequence always looked simple. Target sighted, torpedo fired, explosion recorded in tidy after-action diagrams. Reality looked quieter, almost ordinary. He lowered the periscope halfway. "Fire." Across the room, the fire control technician pressed the firing switch. Inside the submarine, the sound was muted, a short mechanical thump as compressed water pushed the torpedo clear of the tube. "Weapon away." The guidance wire streamed behind it as the torpedo accelerated toward the surface contact. On the sonar display, the weapon's track appeared as a faint line closing steadily. "Weapon link good." Inside the tube, a spool of guidance wire began paying out behind the torpedo as it raced toward the target. Through that thin strand, the submarine could still steer the weapon, adjusting its course as the fire control computers refined the solution. As long as the wire held, the torpedo remained an extension of the submarine itself. The control room remained still. No one spoke unless necessary. The captain raised the periscope again. The ocean looked unchanged. Then, the water beneath the frigate erupted. A violent column of spray and flame tore upward as the torpedo detonated beneath the hull. For an instant, the ship seemed to lift, its structure forced upward by the blast before slamming back into the sea. The captain watched the silhouette twist slightly as smoke began rising along the deck. Behind him, the sonar operator leaned closer to his headset. "Large explosion." A pause. "Target noise increasing." The captain held the periscope steady for another moment, studying the damaged vessel as lights flickered across its superstructure. He lowered the scope slowly. No one in the control room celebrated. There was simply another order to give. "Take us down." The USS Charlotte descended quietly into deeper water, the submarine returning to the same silent movement it had maintained for months. Submarine crews rarely looked their enemy in the eye. They fought through sonar returns and fire control solutions, miles of ocean separating them from the men above. And when the torpedo struck, they could not return to the surface to rescue anyone. A submarine had neither the room nor the resources for that kind of mercy. Early intelligence from other U.S. Navy assets suggested that additional Iranian naval vessels were operating somewhere in the region. Inside the torpedo room, the submarine still carried plenty of weapons. For more than 80 years, the United States Navy had fired torpedoes in exercises and tests, but only once in modern history had one been used in actual combat.